salt and vinegar. Arya's boots sank into the mud ankle-high. It was a rotten mixture of dirt, blood, and guts. The sour smell burned her nostrils, and the taste of her sweat that ran down her face salted her tongue. The hands of fallen men tried to grasp her shin as she passed by them. She had to divert at least a dozen dying soldiers. A foul taste came to her mouth, but she kept advancing through the battlefield. Her armor was slippery from the fluids of the men who met with her blade earlier that day, so she wished she could undress her clothes and armor and soak herself in hot water to get rid of it all. The smell, the feel, the memories. Whoever watched her on the battlefield could never know the way she felt inside. Of that she was certain. How could they know? Arya knew she was the perfect image of strength and fierceness. She made sure of that. However, the exterior did not reflect her feelings. Deflecting the begging hands that crawled to her as she walked, she felt nothing more than deep sadness and disgust of herself. Nasuada's tent was on the north side of the battlefield. It was an improvised command room, where a big map was laid down on the wooden table. Arya entered without being announced by the Queen's guards. "Oh, Arya, come. We need to discuss the next step." Nasuada waved so Arya would approach the table, where her generals and Oryx's ambassador talked about strategies. Arya looked around and didn't see Murtagh. "I don't see Thorn as well," said Fernan to her. He was waiting at a safe distance with Elva as they had agreed before the battle. Eragon had instructed them to hide Fernan's presence to avoid passing the image that the Order was siding with Nasuada, Orin's biggest claim against her ruling. "Good," she said. "It means they took Eragon's orders to go north. The next step should be stopping this madness. You are already pushing back the borders," Arya said in a tired voice. She received a confused look by the human queen. "Stop? What do you mean?" "We cannot stop. Orin is yet to be met on the battlefield. Have you looked outside Nasuada? All those men slaughtered." "For what?" Arya's voice trembled at the question. It was anger mixed with regret. "For what?" "Orin is stealing our lands, forcing his way on us. We advance, for we have a land to protect, or agreed to fulfill." They traded tense looks. Nasuada raised her chin in defiance. "If you won't support us, then you should leave. If the elves won't side with us, then you should expect our enmity. You do not want to be our enemy, Nasuada. I tell you the same, Arya." Arya felt exhausted. Arguing with Nasuada was the last thing she needed at that moment, but she had to defend her point of view. Otherwise, she would turn into the queen who bent the knee to the humans. The greedy race. The violent race. The blind race. She could almost hear her counselors' voices echoing inside her head, repeating their critics toward humankind over and over. The last 2 weeks had been intense. First, she had to face the magicians from the north, almost at the expense of her own life. Then, the retreat to Sunon, now the battle for the borders. She felt overwhelmed, but most importantly, she felt deviated from her course. There were things she needed to do that did not include starting a war against the king of Serda. After her life had been saved by Eragon from a half-world away, Arya left the riders behind dealing with the prisoners and gathered with Angela around a fire pit set on the courtyard of Roran's fortress, followed closely by Fernan. Angela was preparing her potions and concoctions to treat the wounded. When the witch saw the elven queen, a frown came to her face. She pointed the stool opposite her on the other side of the fire, so Arya could sit. Fernan shielded the pair from prying eyes by placing his enormous body behind his rider. Angela stirred the small cauldron that hung over the fire. Under her brows, she looked at Arya. The elf remained silent, hoping that the words would come to her tongue so she could ask the questions she wished to ask without sounding too blunt or offensive. After all, Angela was an ancient being, someone of great knowledge. Arya knew that Angela had more information than she let out, so deep inside she wanted to rip it out from the herbalist make her talk. Force wouldn't help her, neither would abrasive words or even flattery. What a puzzle she had to solve. Are you going to watch me work all night, Your Majesty? Angela asked in a careful tone. Arya looked up to the sky. She could stay there all night, for the weather was pleasant and the sky was starry. It seemed that the panic of that day had never happened. There was a cool breeze blowing from the north, and the chattering coming from the town comforted her somehow. It was like the sacrifice she had made paid off. I see, Angela restarted after being left unanswered. Too many thoughts, too few words. Arya nodded. That was exactly how she felt. Start from the beginning. Why are you here? Angela questioned. I need answers. All right. All you need, then, is to ask questions. Angela stood up with an amused look and moved her stool to sit close to Arya. When she came near, Arya could smell the camphor emanating from the herbalist's hands. I don't want to sound rude or invasive, wise one, Arya said. Angela grinned and kept stirring the green mixture in the cauldron. If all the queens and kings were as respectful as you, I would spend more time in these lands instead of the West. I like living there, but I can get nostalgic sometimes. Is that why you came here? Angela smiled in full this time. She shook her head. You've been learning from him, haven't you? Arya looked at her with confusion, Eragon. You've learned how to be curious and surround us with questions until we say what you want to hear. I consider myself being a little more patient than him. You are, without a doubt. He's learning from you as well. But no, I did not come here because of nostalgia. I have unfinished business. Does it have anything to do with what happened today? Angela stared at Arya with a serious look. She dropped the scoop in the cauldron and turned to face the other. Are you accusing me of something? Arya breathed heavily. If she wished to avoid sounding rude, she could consider this mission a failure. I would never assume you could work against the people of Alagazia. But I cannot stop thinking that you may have information, crucial information, that could help us fight those magicians. Angela straightened her back and looked away, her curls dancing around her face. All you need to know I already told Eragon, and if you two have communication problems, that's not my business. He told me everything you told him to this day. But I believe it's not enough. Indeed, through the years, as they investigated the insurgence of those mysterious magicians, Eragon and Saphira interrogated Angela many times, and every time the herbalist gave the same answers and they would get nowhere. When Murtagh and Thorn would fly north to gather evidence of dark magic, Arya prayed he would bring something useful, but he hardly did. One detail of 20 years before still pounded her mind, though. The very one Angela had sworn Eragon she did not know about. Grabbing the scoop again, Angela restarted to stir the concoction. Tell me, I'd like to hear your theories. A name Arya had only heard from Eragon's telling of Murtagh's adventures rolled out of her tongue, and only that, Barkle, she whispered. And it was enough for Angela to stop again. What about her? I was hoping you could tell me. A cat meowed in the distance, drawing Angela's attention. It's Solumbum calling me to get to work. I don't have all night to sit around the fire with you, Queen Arya. A frustrated breath was let out by Arya. All I need to know is if you know who this person leading the Dark Army is and if she's this Barkle woman. Nothing more. I do not know of anything. But I have my beliefs. One of them is that Barkle is a very dangerous woman, not because of her great power, but because she is insatiable, greedy. And if she is the leader of this dark army, then we can expect the fight to be dirty. She has no boundaries, from where you know her. Angela almost rolled her eyes to Arya. Instead, she shook her head and let out a sarcastic grin. She opened her arms to signalize the space around them, around here, somewhere. It's been a long time. You would be shocked to know how much. So Angela did know more than she told Eragon. Arya wished to ask more about Barkle and what was their relationship, but refrained herself. Her question had been answered. If this answer was truthful, she did not know. Angela filled a flask with the content of the cauldron and stood up. "Now I am curious," she started before leaving. "What made you think about Barkle?" Arya rose to her feet as well. Something someone said earlier after the fight about the leader of the magicians, Eragon and Murtaugh. And their enemies. A shadow covered Angela's eyes for a second. "You should talk to them," she advised, "as soon as possible." Arya's stomach twisted in a painful knot. Seeing Angela in Carver Hall the day before felt at that moment as a bad omen. It was like her aching heart wouldn't let her heal from the loss, reminding her of the prophecy that promised much suffering in the future. But now, she couldn't even consider talking about herself with Angela when the people in the valley suffered. She let Angela go, and there she went to treat the wounded. The next day, she conferred with Eragon and Murtaugh in the study located at the highest level of Roran's fortress. Arya used the mirror that was enchanted so Roran could scry with the others around the land. Without any magical powers, all he had to do was to say the right words, and the magic of the mirror would connect him to the other mirrors in all corners of Alagaesia and Fel Thindara. Murtaugh's brow formed a deep line of concern when Arya told them what had happened. Eragon, that appeared side by side, with his brother even being half-world away from him, helped with the details that only he and Fernan could know. But in the end, all that mattered to the Red Rider was what that man had said. "Then tell him she is coming. Tell them she is coming with their worst nightmare. Their enemies are alive and hungry for their flesh." "What does it mean, Murtaugh?" Arya asked. Was he talking about Barkle? "And who are those enemies he mentioned?" A glance to Eragon's face made her think that he knew what it meant as well. Murtaugh scrubbed his face and looked away. Arya could see the inside of a big room. He was where he often was when scrying her about official matters, Nasuada's castle in Illyra. He licked his lips and started speaking with a low voice. It took them 20 years to be strong, but it finally happened. "I wish we could have acted sooner." Arya's patience was by a thread. "What is it, Murtaugh?" "Say it." It was Eragon who answered her. "The Razak." That man was talking about Barkle bringing the Razak back. Arya felt her face going pale. It was a coldness that went from her scalp to her neck, making it difficult to swallow. She fought with that idea because it seemed as the nightmare of the war was taking over them again. "It's not possible they're dead." Murtaugh stared at her with fearful eyes. "They laid eggs. Well, at least one. That night when I met Saros and his men, they talked about Barkle. She enchanted an amulet to each one of them that protected them from magic. It was wordless magic. It raised my curiosity, so we went looking for her." Arya recalled the episode told to her by Eragon one night in the Eyrie 10 years before. All she knew was that Murtaugh had been tracking a secret location when he came across Saros, the smuggler. In the end, he killed them all in a violent fight and was left without the information he tried to get. He kept his telling with a grave look. She suspected that the rest would be a novelty to her. It wasn't so hard to find her. She lived in the north in a hut. I tracked the path took by Saros and his men before meeting me, and it led us to the right location, so we went. She wasn't home, so we came back the next day. And the next, and the next. Thorn and I camped in her front yard and waited. Still she had not come home. So we gave up, but before we left, I decided to look inside her house. I broke in, and there, in her living room, eggshells laid on the carpet by the fireplace. I knew what it was immediately. That's when we decided to come to Anga for the first time, so we could recollect and join the order. Arya looked at Eragon and saw a repentant expression on his face. That's when she realized he knew all about it but kept it from her. "You knew." He looked away but confirmed. "Aye. Why didn't you tell me?" Her voice wasn't angry but hurt. It seemed to her that the secrets between them would never have an end. At the time, we were always busy, so talking about Murtaugh and the things he did before joining the order seemed like a waste of time. We had more important matters to discuss, more important than the rebirth of the Razak. Our survival here was more important than that, yes. He stared at her with a firm look. Every time we talked was so I could ask you for supplies or share my concern about the crazed Eldenari and the fact that the dragon eggs wouldn't hatch. That's not an explanation. Eragon. You could have told me later. You had many years to tell me. Or that day by the fire, when you shared with Oric the vision you had of the magicians practicing dark magic. There was a conflicted look in his eyes as he was deciding to say something or not. He didn't have to, because Murtogh said it first. I asked him not to tell you. It's my fault. Why? I wanted to prove myself as a member of the Order, so I asked him to allow us to go find the Razak and kill it as our first mission. I wanted to clear my name by bringing its dead body for all the people in Alagaezia to see. But I asked him not to tell anyone yet in case I failed, and I failed. I've never found it, and until this day I thought it had frozen to death in the north after feeding of the witch-barkle. Arya did not have other options than to trust his words, for they were speaking in the ancient language, but the feeling of betrayal still stung in her core. She had to remind herself, though, that an important piece of information was also being kept from Eragon, something more personal, deeper. She looked at him with forgiveness in her eyes and expected him to understand. She hoped he would forgive her too one day. Eragon considered Roran's fortress a good protection to the people that could not move, but for those who could, he advised to go somewhere safer. He asked Arya to organize the evacuation of Carvahall, preferably to Sunon, and to apply the strategies they had agreed on months before in the Hall of Colours, with slight changes. Avelina and Runela would stay in Carvahall to protect those in the fortress. Tom and Lorgas would go to Sunon, and the rest would patrol the northern portions of Du Weldenvarden. We can't go, announced Murtogh. Eragon frowned. Excuse me. Murtogh raised his chin in a slight defiance. Nasuada is marching south to face Orin's army in battle. I'm expected to join her soon. It took a few seconds for Eragon to say something, so Arya knew that Saphira was talking in his mind. Must I remind you of your duty as a rider? No, I'm aware of that, but my wife needs me by her side. Arya felt out of place in that conversation, so she remained silent. Wise decision, my darling. Fernan said with some humor, but sensing her apprehension, he did not let it all out. She looked outside and saw Fernan flying. As I said, I'm aware of my obligations as a rider. Eragon took a deep breath to control his temper. Right now, your obligation is to fly north, not south. Murtogh shook his head, and Arya saw his face turning red. You don't understand, I need to go south. Brother, listen to me. Eragon sat on the edge of his chair. If you go south against my orders, you will be acting on self-interest. And you know what happens when a rider acts solely on his or her behalf. Arya felt a chill running through her spine just to consider the consequences of breaking the order's oath. She looked at Fernan again and could not imagine seeing him losing the ability of rational thinking, or having her power dimming by the second until she could no longer practice magic. Breaking the oath meant getting back to the roots of civilization for the offenders when dragons and elves were enemies. The terrible prospect must have troubled Murtogh as well, because his squinted eyes tried to hide the tears that came to his eyes. You have to understand, brother, pled Murtogh. I cannot let her alone. Ask her to come home then, Eragon suggested with a soft voice. Murtogh let out a pained laugh and wiped the tears from his eyes. Do you know Nasuada? Eragon's eyes were full of compassion. I'm sorry, but you must go north. As soon as possible. Can you at least send someone to help her? Someone to be with her, to make sure she is all right, our child too. His plead struck a chord in Arya's mind. She understood him now. I will go. We are allies, her kingdom and ours, so I was expected to join her anyway. The same goes for you, Arya. You cannot go south when there's a fight in the north. It won't be in self-interest, will it? I don't wish to go south and fight in a war that I think is useless. Besides, Fernan and I will try to mediate the dispute so we can stop it before it even begins. Isn't it part of our duty to stop unreasonable wars? So there she went to the south of the Brodding Kingdom on Fernan's back, accompanied by Elva, after seeing the evacuation of Carver Hall completed. And now she stood in front of Nasuada, who looked terrifying in her black mail shirt, covered in leather and metal plates, adapted in the stomach to accommodate her advanced pregnancy. Shall we start this conversation again, Nasuada? I believe we can do better this time, Arya said, and watched as the other relaxed her shoulders and grabbed the arms of her chair so she could sit down. Please, Arya, let us start over.